Hello folks, welcome to Eyes on Nature. This is a show dedicated to inspiring the appreciation and enjoyment of nature. We're glad you're here. My name is Scott Heth. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut. And this show is brought to you by Nutmeg Television. We're happy to be here in the Nutmeg TV studios. And the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut. And ELCCT owns the Indian Rock Preserve over on Route 69 on the Wolcott side of Bristol, Connecticut. And we also run and operate the Harry C. Barnes Memorial Nature Center on Shrub Road, also in Bristol. And that facility is our community nature center dedicated to having people come in, regular visiting hours, learning about nature, going on trails, seeing some really cool animals. And if you'd like to know more about what we do, you can visit our website at elcct.org. And so this show is dedicated to inspiring the appreciation of nature. And I have my guest here, Erin O'Connell, with me today. And Erin works with me at ELCCT. And so maybe you can tell us a little more about what you do.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me today.
Sure.
I am the coordinator of volunteer services and animal care at the Environmental Learning Centers of Connecticut. I spend half of my time between Indian Rock and Barnes Nature Center. And my role is really kind of developing and recruiting and training all of our volunteers. We have about 200 volunteers in our program, which is great, and they help out with all aspects of the facility, from helping with special events to animal care to administrative, marketing, all of that kind of stuff. And I also work with the animals. We have a great collection of farm animals at Indian Rock, and we also have your quintessential nature center critters: snakes, turtles, lizards, birds of prey at the Barnes Nature Center.
Great, and I bet the volunteers like to work with the animals as well.
It's a big seller. Yep.
Everybody wants to work with the animals, which is really great, and it helps us out a lot. Mm-hmm. Well, Erin and I both have experience in maple sugaring, and so we figured that since spring is here, finally, that we would talk about that. It's traditionally a springtime event where people make maple syrup, and there's different ways to do that, from the small backyard sugaring operator to a big-time sort of mechanized operator, and we're going to go visit one of those in a few minutes. But do you have any fond memories about doing sugaring?
Fond memories. You know, it's a really great time of year. Springtime is just, it's a happy time. So you're, part of maple sugaring is being outside. So when it's starting to get nice out, starting to get warmer during the days, it's just good to be outside. So that's a happy time. And it's just it's a nice feel to be involved with nature in that way, working with the trees and taking a raw form, the sap from the tree, and just creating something so sweet and delicious like maple syrup.
And it's warming up, which is, you know, coming out of the winter and everything.
Yes, absolutely.
So it's very neat. It smells delicious when it's being made.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little more about the process? I'm not sure that people really know what's involved with making maple syrup.
Sure. So making maple syrup, we are going to be first identifying our sugar maple trees. We make maple syrup from the sap of the sugar maple tree. So identifying the tree is the first step. And once we've done that, we actually have to do something called tapping the tree. So we drill a small hole through the bark to extract the sap. And how we're extracting the sap is we're just putting a little hollow tube in there called a spile. Sap is going to flow down and out through that spile, and we collect it in either a bucket or a more modern method, which I think we'll talk about a little bit. And then we bring that sap to our sugar house or wherever you're going to be creating your syrup, and we boil off the excess water. And really, that's all there is to it. We're just taking that sap and we're boiling it and
boiling it
and boiling it and boiling it
and boiling it some more.
Yes.
A lot of people, I think that we add something to it to make make the color, but that's really not true, is it?
Yeah, so we really don't add anything to the sap or the syrup. And all we're doing is actually just boiling off the excess water, because the sap, when it comes out of the tree, there's just a tiny little bit of sugar in there, like 2 to 3% sugar. By the time we're done boiling off the excess water, we'll have 66% sugar in that syrup.
And so there's different ways of doing that, from the sort of, like I mentioned earlier, the backyard kind of operator, few taps, to the bigger operators. How was maple sugaring discovered? How did people know to take liquid out of a tree and then boil it and then make something that's delicious?
Yeah, it was probably a happy accident. The Native Americans in both the northeastern part of the United States and then in Canada actually discovered that the sap of the sugar maple tree could create something like a nice sweet drink, or something that they could use in cooking.
Right. And so but they didn't have pots or anything. How did they?
No, they didn't. We didn't have any kind of metal kind of materials until the colonial people came. So they would actually just make a little hatchet kind of V shape in the bark of the tree, and then they could add another little piece of bark, kind of like a homemade spile, that would divert the sap down, out, and into their little either what they called a mokuck, which is a hollowed out log, or they could use some kind of fashioned bowl, either of clay or bark.
And then they would boil it in a log?
Yeah, so...
Put the log over the fire?
Can't put the log over the fire. That probably wouldn't end well. But that mokuck, it's a hollowed out log with the sap in there. They could actually have a fire nearby, heat up some rocks, very carefully take those hot rocks and put it into the mokuck. And if you do that, you'll see a bunch of steam coming off of the hot rocks, and that is the water evaporating out of the sap.
And we've actually done that as a demonstration, and it works, which is surprising, I guess.
And it takes a while.
And it takes a long time. And the quality of the syrup, you can imagine, probably wasn't that great, with those rocks coming out of the fire with all the soot and everything on it and going into the log and back again. Yep. So it was quite laborious. And one thing I'd like to add too is the Native Americans really, because they didn't have refrigeration, they would keep boiling their syrup past syrup, and they would make sugar. And maple sugar was actually a trading currency that they would use to trade with themselves, and then later on with the colonial settlers that came. So in a little while we're going to show some. I've got some old spiles here, but first we're going to go, and recently I went on a tour to the Lamothe Sugar House, which is in Burlington, Connecticut. And Rob Lamothe is one of the biggest producers. In fact, I think he is the biggest producer now in Connecticut. Our area. Yeah. I've known him for a very long time. He got me started with maple sugaring. And so we recently went there, and he told us about all the stuff that he does. And he started similar to the way I started. I had maybe 50 taps when I first started, and I grew to, I don't know, maybe 750 taps, and started using pipeline, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But he started about there, and now he's, I don't know how many, 75,000 taps or something like that that he runs. And so why don't we take a look and go watch that visit?
Absolutely.
Hi, Scott Heth here. I'm with Rob Lamothe from Lamothe Sugar House. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think I've known you for, is it 30 years now?
Probably about 35 years, yeah.
35 years.
Yeah.
Rob was instrumental in getting me started in maple sugaring way back when. I won't say how long ago, because that dates me a little bit. But Lamothe Sugar House now is the biggest producer of maple products in the state of Connecticut.
That's right.
So I remember when you started at just one little evaporator outside, and now you're spaceship mode here. And tell us a little bit about how you got started.
Well, back in the early 70s, we produced all of our own food here on the farm. The whole family did. And what happened was we just thought that it would be a really nice way of getting a sweetener. We had our own hogs, we had turkeys, we had pigs. One of those things that we just thought would be a really fun thing to do in the springtime. My brother came up with 7 taps, and he said, hey, let's make some maple syrup. I didn't have a clue in what I was doing. And so we went to the library, got a book, started reading up on it, and we made about 8 quarts of maple syrup the first year. Second year, we had about 35 taps. Wanted a little bit more fun. We didn't know enough to stop at that point. And we had a little bit more for giving away gifts and birthdays and things like that. The third year, that's where things changed. What happened was that we had about 55 taps. We had moved up into an old building that we had. We had renovated it. We had electricity in it. We had running water. I thought I died and went to heaven when I had a light bulb in it, you know. That was great. And one day I was boiling. We had flat pans. And a gentleman walked up from the road and he says, can I buy a quart of maple syrup from you? I said, absolutely. I think that's all I made for the whole day. But I ran down to the house, I sanitized the ball mason jar, and I sold it to him. He was delighted. So was I.
Today.
Our pleasure.
I got one more question for
Sure.
you. This is part of a segment that we're calling Science of Spring.
Right.
So what's your favorite sign of spring?
Well, the sugar maples, I'm always looking at the sugar maples, and when those buds on the trees start to swell open, I know the season's coming to an end, it's over with. And that's one of the signs of spring. You know, we're very enthusiastic about going into the season, but we're really happy to see the season coming to an end. You know, here out at the Sugar House, we've always had this little standing thing. How can you tell if you had a good sugaring season? If everyone in the family, after 6 or 8 weeks, is still talking to each other, we know we had a good season.
Rob, thank you very much. I enjoyed spending some time with Rob. I've known him for a very long time, as I mentioned before. And he got me started with maple sugaring, and it's really amazing how technology has changed. If you noticed all the equipment he has in there, and the hum of the room. What we didn't see was he has what's called a reverse osmosis machine, which takes out the majority of the water before it even goes into the evaporator.
Mm-hmm. Everything's state of the art now.
Everything's state of the art. Costs a lot of money, so you know it's really a business. You have to look at what it's going to cost, how much you're going to make, and he's been able to do very well with that. He's got a nice store there and everything, so. It was fun going back and seeing how things changed over time. But when we were working on maple sugaring, we didn't have that kind of equipment. Ours was a little bit more traditional, more basic. So, and even before when the time when we did sugaring, before that, it was very, very basic. So I'm going to hold this up. Looks like a piece of wood. Basically, it is a piece of wood. This is a piece of sumac. This is a piece of sumac, and what the colonial settlers would do before they had a lot of metal is they would, at night, they'd sit in front of the fire and they'd take a hot rod and they'd take this piece of sumac that had a soft center, and then they would poke a hole through it here, and that would act as their spile or their spout. and they'd make a whole bunch of them, and then they drill a hole in the tree and put this in, maybe put a notch on it so that a bucket could hang from it. But and then things progressed, and so then you had forges, and here's an old Warner spile. It's got a patent D on it, so they were patenting them way back then. It's made out of lead, I think, and which we wouldn't use
Nowadays,
today.
probably not.
No, everything is stainless steel now. But this was one of the first spiles that were made. You can see how it's got the little trough there for the sap to come out. They got a little bit bigger and better as time went on. This is another version of it.
And you can see on the back there, well, on the front there's the spile part where the sap would flow through, but on the other end it's not a very long piece that goes into the tree. So when you're actually tapping the tree, drilling the hole in, you're only going in a little bit, right? So you're only going to what's called the sapwood.
The sapwood, right. You're not going in very far. If you go in too far, you hit the heartwood and there's no sap in there.
Exactly.
If you don't go far enough, then you're still in the bark, and you're not getting sap out of there either. This is more like what you would find at a local hardware store now. And, you know, we encourage people to learn more about this because it's a fun thing to do with families. If you have some maple trees in your backyard, put up a few taps.
If you are thinking about doing that at home on your own, good thing to know would be just how much sap you need to collect to get just a little bit of the finished product. So what was the magic number that we used to tell the kids when we were doing
Magic
this?
number, I think, was 40.
40. So it has to be at least 40 degrees during the day.
Right.
And warm, and freezing temperatures at night, but 40 for during the day for the sap to flow, and the sap's coming from the roots and going up to the tree to feed the growth of the leaves. 40 degrees and 40 years old. Your tree had to be 40 years old tree in order to tap it and collect its sap. And what was the other 40? The other 40 was it takes 40 buckets or 40 gallons of sap to make
a lot.
1 gallon of syrup. So it is a bit time consuming, but very fun.
It's a lot of fun, and it is a lot of work. And so these were the buckets that people still use, but most of the time they're using pipeline. And the other thing, if you're doing it at home, is to remember you kind of don't want to boil all that sap in your kitchen. Especially if you have wallpaper, because it's a lot. If you think about, you were making 40 to 1, so to make 1 gallon of syrup, you're boiling off 40 gallons of water, and all that water is going off as steam. And if you get all that steam in your kitchen, it's probably not a good thing.
Doing it outside is probably a better bet.
Probably a better bet. And so nowadays we use pipeline. So instead of going from bucket to bucket and emptying them, we used to use oxen to do that. Now we use pipeline, and we just drill a hole in the tree, and one tree connects to the next tree, and people are probably familiar with seeing this along the side of the road when you're driving. But it saves a whole lot of time. And then you collect it at a collection station. And some people, Rob Lamoth uses vacuum pumps.
Yep, and that's not actually a vacuum sucking out
Right.
the sap from the tree. It's actually just creating enough of a vacuum so the sap doesn't get stuck in the pipeline.
That's right. A lot of people think, well, you know, aren't you stealing all the food? Because sap is basically the food for the tree, and if you put a vacuum pump on there and you suck all that sap out, aren't you sort of stealing that food? Well, basically, exactly what you said is you're trying to just keep the sap moving in the tubes. Yeah. So nowadays, of course, we use gas-powered tappers and electric-powered tappers to drill the hole, 2.5 inches or so into the tree. I don't want to date myself, but when I started, it was before battery-powered drills, and we used these. So we would tap 250, 300, 400 taps with the brace and bit, and in the middle of the winter.
Truly a labor of love.
A labor of love. What else can we talk about for maple sugaring?
Let's see. Well, we could show them how the bucket actually sits on a tap, right? So if that tap, say you're the tree,
okay.
right? So put that bit into your bark.
Okay.
Right? And this thing would actually sit right here on the hook, which then leans up against the tree. And if you think about it though, just this setup alone probably wouldn't be the best setup, right? We need one more thing. What is the nemesis of the sap if it's just out there like this?
You don't want any more water in there than you have to have.
Right.
Because you're already boiling the water off.
The whole point is you're boiling it off. So if you're ever driving down the road and you see a whole bunch of buckets hanging on the trees, they're going to have lids on them as well to keep out the rain, the snow, and bark and things like that.
Bark and bugs as much as possible.
As much as
and
possible.
animals like sap too. It's nice and sweet. You know,
It
looks like water. I should have brought some, but it looks like water. It's got 2%, 3% sugar in it.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said before, we're trying to get it up to about 66%.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a lot of work, and we don't have the fancy setup that Rob has with the hood, the steam hood, and everything. We had to watch out that it didn't boil over. Wood-fired, and his is oil-fired, so he just flips a switch and it goes. Flips another switch and it goes off.
Mm-hmm.
We had to make sure that we had enough sap in the pans, because just like running out of water in your spaghetti pot, you know, you're going to end up in trouble.
Yep.
So, but it's a lot of fun. We invite everyone to learn more about it. It's a good thing to do with your family. It gets you outside, and we really want people to consider spending more time outside. And the last thing I want to talk about is once you make the maple syrup, here's one of Rob's jugs. Once you make the maple syrup, what do you use it for? Most people put it on pancakes and French toast and stuff.
Breakfast items, yeah.
What do you think? What are some of the things that you've used it for?
I'm not big on pancakes and things like that, so I actually will put it on a nice little snack of popcorn. Popcorn. Which some people think is a little odd, but believe me, just try it. It's pretty good.
I happen to have some here
for you. Oh, look at
that. And if you want to do the honors and put some syrup on there. There's other things you can put it on. I like putting it on vanilla ice cream.
That's popular. Yeah.
People do that a lot. There's all kinds of recipes you can look up online, or recipe books for maple confectionaries, and maple candy is also really popular. Maple lollipops. There's all kinds of things that you can use it for. It doesn't just have to be for the traditional pancake and French toast and things like that. So. Well, I think we're just about running out of time. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome, and we look forward to having you come back. And we're going to be doing lots of different shows, folks, about all things having to do with nature. We're going to have more guest speakers here. We're going to bring in some animals. We're going to go out into the field like we did with Rob Lamoth, and just trying to inspire people to learn more about the natural world. So in the meantime, we hope you keep your eyes on nature, and we will see you the next time.